there was that report that came out late last week. It was actually before the West Virginia game about the possibility of Kansas playing in an international game in London against Arizona State. That was the report. The game, by the way, has not been finalized. This is just kind of some reporting, but Lance Leipold was asked about it earlier in the week and kind of gave a long winding answer that basically all but confirmed, at least in my eyes, that like it's going to happen. He started off by saying like, yeah, I can't officially say anything about it. And then he gave this kind of long answer about how playing internationally may actually be a good thing. And I basically took that as, well, that's presumably meaning that Kansas is going to be playing internationally next year in 2026 against Arizona State. So a lot of mixed reaction to it. I think the biggest takeaway that I have, and we don't have to spend too much time really analyzing it specifically, but the biggest takeaway that I had was the proposed date that has been reported for the game is September 26th, which is basically 4 weeks into the season. Right. And to me, that's a little alarming that you're going to be, basically jarring your team in the middle of the season with international travel. I mean, just you look at some of the international games that have happened in recent history, and if you lose an international game, it can really disrupt your season. Florida State loses to Georgia Tech. They go 2-10. K-State lost to Iowa State to start this season in Ireland, and look at what's happened to those boys. So you're doing it in the middle of the year. I don't know. I mean, that was kind of my initial reaction to it is, I think from a fan experience and a fan perspective standpoint, I think it's a great, for KU fans to have a chance to go to London possibly and watch KU play a game there. Like that part of it is all sick, and like the brand aspect and all that stuff. But, from a competitive standpoint, I think it is a little bit concerning because if you go and you lose that game, it could set your season back really. And you could be up for that being a game that completely swings your season positively or negatively.
Sure. And I think even teams that have won internationally, the travel has often impacted them in the game after they come back and can be the sort of thing that can derail you a little bit, even if you find a way to win there. And I think too, like this, this is going to sound like a cop out a little bit, but I don't put a ton of stock in what happens in those international games. There's so many different factors. You watch the Iowa State K-State game, Nick. The field conditions looked awful in Iowa.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, I'm not saying that's going to be the case. I mean, I think they're talking about it being at Wembley, right? So,
yeah,
the field would probably be pretty good. But I'm just saying there are all these extra factors that matter quite a bit, maybe more than an ordinary game where you're just saying, hey, are we better than this game, better than this team on this day? I think, Thamel brought up the point when he initially reported it, that because KU Stadium is going to be in a state of construction next year, this is a home game that KU is giving up, and maybe they were more willing to do so. We've talked to Travis Goff. Obviously, one of the things that he said is that KU will be at reduced capacity next year as they continue to work on that east side, and so maybe it didn't matter as much to give away a home game to go there. I'm generally against international games for a lot of the reasons we just talked about. But to play devil's advocate, Nick, when we talked to Lance Leipold earlier this week, and you could go back on our channel and see that, one of the things that really stood out to me was him talking about the experience for the players and how he was a grad assistant, I believe, on the Nebraska team that went to Tokyo. And just basically how all these years later, you may be talking about, hey, I had 3 tackles against this team or whatever else. Everybody's talking about the fact that you got to go to Tokyo and you got to play there and experience that. And it would be, so similar for London and the type of trip that a lot of these student athletes wouldn't have had the chance to make up to this point. And so from an experience standpoint, you brought up sort of the fan experience standpoint for Kansas fans, if they can make it over. All of those things are positives. And then, the branding thing you mentioned, and also you tend to usually get paid pretty well to go overseas. And especially with Kansas giving up a home game, I would imagine the financial incentives would need to be pretty strong.
Yeah, the construction thing is interesting to me because,
yeah.
Look, I am not a expert in construction. I whatever KU's plans may be, but kind of my initial thought, Kevin, was does it really help that much? Because I think I misspoke. It said September 26th. I meant September 19th is actually the reported date for the
Yeah.
game. Kansas is already on the schedule, supposed to play 2 home games before that, right?
Yeah.
So in my mind, I'm thinking, how much of a benefit construction wise do you really get from having to already play home games, and then you get like basically 10 days essentially where
Well,
you can
I don't think
like
that it's. I don't think that it's the benefit to construction. I think they're just saying, hey, if there's only going to be 36,000, 38,000, whatever fans in there, like it's okay for us to give up a home game because it's not going to be the full experience. I didn't take it as like, oh, we'll be able to get more done with the crane with people not being there. I took it at least more as we're not giving up an actual like full on home game experience for this because the stadium is going to be in a state of construction.
Gotcha. One of the note is if that date does end up coming into fruition, Kansas' schedule currently reflects that they would be playing Missouri on the 12th, the week before. So you're talking about another layer of that where you're going to play your arch rival and then presumably get on a plane to London the next day. I would guess like you'd have to travel pretty quick. I don't know how that works.
Teams usually fly out. I feel like midweek or maybe even a little later. Like get there on like Thursday. And I've always kind of thought like you, Nick, that if you're going to do one of those trips, like get the jet lag out of the way, fly early in the week, do all those things. I think a lot of coaches feel like we'd rather have our usual strong practice schedule, for the first few days, really get stuff honed in and then fly out because it's not as important for them to be as sharp, on Friday, for instance,
Yeah.
as opposed to earlier in the week where it's like, hey, we're really trying to hammer in this game plan for Arizona State, and you guys are zombies out here, basically. So I would imagine they'd fly out midweek. It feels like that's what a lot of these teams do is fly out like Wednesday or Thursday.
Well, I do remember the Chiefs when they played in Germany a couple years ago. They actually published a study that basically suggested, from a player perspective, it's better if you just wait and you don't even bother to try and like calculate jet lag. You just
Yeah.
basically play on like you see what I'm saying. Like you just don't even bother to you don't even try to change the players' body clocks. You just go like right at the end and don't even worry about it and play the game and come back. So I don't know, maybe there's some science behind that or whatever that's above my pay grade and above my
Definitely
knowledge.
above my pay grade, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.